Hi, and welcome to Your Truth Explored, the podcast where we unpack your truths to bring clarity, understanding, and insight into what lies ahead. My name is Rodney Reynders. Today's guest is someone who has built a reputation for solving the problems that many people believe simply cannot be solved. Joining us is Dion Tobi, a support coordinator specialist, systems thinker, and passionate advocate for helping both families and organizations navigate the complexities of the NDIS. With more than a decade of experience across the disability, early childhood, and community sectors, Dion has developed a unique ability to see beyond the immediate challenge and identify the underlying systems that create it. Whether he's helping families navigate difficult funding decisions, supporting providers to strengthen their operational systems, or working with leadership teams to build sustainable organizations, Dion is driven by one simple belief. Great organizations should never have to choose between making a difference and remaining financially sustainable. Today we'll explore the realities of NDIS, the challenges providers face behind the scene, why strong systems create better outcomes for participants, and how moving the right bottleneck can transform both organizations and the lives of the people they support. Well, Dion, it's great to have you here today. Thank you for taking the time to chat to us.
Thank you for inviting me, Rodney. It's a pleasure to be on the channel and yeah, parting with some of my wisdom and experience to the listeners.
That's awesome. And we're going to start the journey. You speak about this idea of sustainable performance, which really floats my boat as well. So, what does sustainable performance mean to you? And let's see where the journey takes us.
Yeah, so sustainable performance is something that I think people think of as a very simple. In my experience, it's quite multifaceted and something that can be quite complex depending on what you're wanting to look at and this the position you're in and the type of work you're doing. So most people, when you talk about sustainable performance, I think a lot of people jump to KPIs and workflow output.
Yeah.
They think about how do we maintain, the services that we're putting out, the numbers that we're doing, how do we grow from that
Yeah.
as well and keep things moving. Whereas in actual fact, it's a people issue. And when I say issue, I mean it pertains specifically to the people, not systems and processes specifically as such.
Yeah.
So for me, talking about sustainable performance, it looks much deeper than the surface issue of, well, what are we continuing to do? And well, how are we supporting our people and enabling our people to do that when we're
Yeah.
talking about teams and individuals? Um, because I think that's where it really comes from. If your people are supported, your people are equipped, they're well resourced, they've got the education and the knowledge and experience around them, then anything is sustainable because
Yeah.
they've got the room to challenge, to question, to grow and learn. And that's all the things that make that happen.
And I might just put in there, if you're listening and you're not familiar with the acronym KPI, it's a key performance indicator, and it's a very it was well lent on a couple of, like, maybe 10 years ago. It was the buzzword that we all used in commerce.
Mhm.
But yes, it did just that. It eliminated the individual and made it about this magical number. And so where we at as the pendulum starts swinging back and we start recognizing the individual within that transaction, where we at, do you think, in the commercial space?
I think we're in a position where it's a very uncertain landscape. I think there's a lot changing around that, but there's a lot of work to be done still. Um, so some of the work I've been focusing on more recently is around that psychological safety and psychosocial hazard work, which very much falls into the bigger picture of what I've mentioned so far.
Yeah,
And that sustainable workflow where it's I think a lot of people are starting to understand that, oh, this is something that is becoming more widely recognized and we're understanding more of the impacts around things like psychological safety. But we've still got a long way to go in how to effectively implement that and actually have that show up in our workplaces and with our teams and putting people first. Uh,
yeah,
as you said, that key performance indicator and that KPI piece was very big about a decade ago.
yeah,
I think we saw it spike a little bit more maybe through COVID again, where people didn't know how to monitor things more remotely, and
yeah, that's
lots of
true.
businesses had to shift. how they were navigating their teams, their output. We very much came back to a KPI centric workforce.
Yeah,
And I think now, particularly over the last 12 months, from what I've seen, is that we're starting to shift away from that a bit more again and starting to look more at the people. And rather than going, well, here are your KPIs and having that as a moving target, saying, well, this is what you're doing. Can I see the work you're putting in, the value that you're bringing out of that, and being focused more on enabling that to happen?
yeah.
Um, so I think there's a long way to go around that still, in how to effectively implement it, but we're in a good space of change.
We're on the journey. Now, it alludes to these two pathways. You've got the sort of commercial arm, the manager looking at the staff,
Hmm.
and then you've got the individual, the staff member going, how am I going in this game plan? So if we look at just for a minute from the commerce lens, the manager looking down at the staff, one of my favorite activities is this idea of self-care. There's a commercial argument for self-care to work well in your industry. And
Yeah.
then following that statement, I wait 5 minutes and wait for the eyes to start rolling because there's here we go again. This is some I'm going to pay.
Yep.
And then we start the discussion of how you can actually nut out a meeting into a dollars and cents term, and then how self-care, healthy self-care, the individual side again of the transaction, if that's in a healthy space, how are you actually being value to the business? So
Yeah.
how are you going in terms of the commercial language around this idea of looking towards the individual and bringing healing or bringing direction or whatever the magical word is so that
Hmm.
the commerce sees the value?
Yeah. And again, even within those two streams, looking at this one more specifically, I think there's still a couple of streams even within that,
Okay.
where if you're looking at the staff member from a leadership perspective and you're trying to support that self-care and that well-being side of things, there's an element of that that is individualized and personalized to that staff member.
Yeah.
There's always things that you're unable to control out of that. Where going back, say 20 years ago, it was very much that leave your personal issues at the door. We
Yeah.
come into work, we do the work, we leave. We don't bring the outside in.
Yeah.
Whereas now, I think we're seeing that shift again of, well, that's part of you. That's part of your well-being, your personality, your circumstances, and how you show up at work and do the work that you do. So there's an element of that self-care that always needs to be personal and individualized of how that person does it for them outside of work and how it then flows into their work.
Yeah.
From that more professional side of things, as a leader, I think there's an element there of not necessarily having to have the building blocks there to say, this is how we practice self-care in the workplace. This is how we do it as a team. But it's being open to that and having that conversation. And I think allowing for that conversation to take place where it's more setting a scene in a culture than it is an active uh, practice as such. So, having people be able to come in and say, hey, why are we doing this? I don't understand, or this is where I'm at today, or um, I've just got some questions around this in how you want it, and being able to have some of those open conversations that you've talked about in some of your previous episodes, Rodney, of being curious and what we perceive as failure when we don't know something, or being able to not have that kind of approach to it and that mentality, but being able to explore.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important part that our managers and our leaders have today is that it's being able to allow your team to show up and giving them a space where they can do that safely and feel like they're going to be valued and get something out of that instead of just feeling like it's going to make them a target or make them feel belittled or any of those sorts of things. And I think that's where that self-care aspect comes into the workplace. It's about setting a culture and a scene for your staff where
Yeah.
they have that layer of safety.
And I think even for myself, Dion, if you distill it down to the very baseline of psychology, and you say, what is the trigger? It's I'm safe or I'm not safe.
Yeah.
I'm not safe. I'm healthy. I'm healthy. I'm thinking. I'm doing life. I'm not safe. All of a sudden, there's
Hmm.
things.
We see people withdraw. We see people start to go against the grain or
Yeah.
not actively cause friction, but look like they're causing friction because they don't understand, they don't feel safe, so they're not as engaged to or to take part. They don't have
Yeah,
that joint accountability anymore.
that's right. And I think also if you are listening from and you've got your corporate lens on and you think of your protocols or your reactions or your responses. I was just thinking of the story of the previous podcast where a kid was pulling on a drawer and the drawer had a latch to protect it from over opening, and they
Mm,
fell and hurt their elbow, and then nobody wanted to report it because somebody's going to be in trouble, yeah.
mm,
And so I'm not safe. So we don't do anything with the data. But however, not
yeah.
doing anything with the data, our mates, the kids actually getting hurt yet. So we really need to do something with that data.
Mm.
And so do you see the pendulum shifting on that where e-commerce is going, oh, I can see the value, or where are we on that journey?
Yeah. I think there's more people seeing value in it and recognizing that, burnout in particular
Yeah,
is, it's a consistent, and I think more and more people in that space that have to deal with recruitment and onboarding and training and the likes, interviews in a space that has vastly changed since COVID around that interview process and how many resources and how quickly you have to move that compared to, again, a decade ago.
yeah,
Um, they're recognizing that losing a person or a staff member to burnout or psychological risks and hazards is not as simple as saying, well, we pay that staff member $80,000. We've got to get somebody in, and it's $80,000. That it's that flat line comparison.
yeah.
They're finding that, or actually, it's 4 or 5 times more
That's
in
right.
losing that person because not only are you losing their experience, the value, the knowledge that they hold in that position, but then you've got downtime of workflow. You've got
Yep.
taking other people offline to interview, to recruit, to train, to
Right.
mentor. It's it builds up very quickly.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
and I think that's what a lot of businesses are reeling in the current economy, where a lot of people don't have spare money to just be throwing around or for a rainy day when something goes wrong. It's, well,
Yeah,
how do we make every dollar count?
yeah,
And it's much easier to invest in maintaining the people that you've got and spend, say, $10,000 to support that instead of $100,000 to fix
replace them.
after the fact and
Yeah,
replace. That's right.
that's right. And I think you make an important point there because business at large doesn't do that math. So if you're a manager and you're
Mm.
listening and you want to change a $60,000 employee, you're right. It is something like 4 or 5 times the statistics of the value. So you're talking about a $250 exchange to get exactly the same performance.
Yep.
So if you're getting a 70% performance out of staff member, how much is it going to cost you to encourage that person to perform well versus this 5 times fee to replace and then roll the dice as to whether the
Yeah.
replacement is in fact going to be any better?
Well, and that's exactly it, Rodney. And the other fact that's harder to measure in that too, that, from previous to COVID, and if we're going back, say, 10, 15 years, the the workforce looked very different. You had people that were in careers for 30 years, 40 years. You'd have the new people coming through the door, whether it was a trade or not, that they would have that experience, that knowledge to be able to hand that down and say, this is how it looks, this is what you can do, this is how you can learn things faster and better. Over the last 5 years, we've seen that where most people are lucky if they can hold staff members for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
So not only are you losing that staff member and costing 4 or 5 times the amount to replace them, you're also in a lot of ways now losing a senior staff member
yeah, that's right.
because they might have been there for 3 or more years. That
Yeah,
it's a wealth of knowledge and experience that you can't put a price on in
yeah,
today's climate.
yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting discussion. You don't hear that conversation often, so I'm glad you mentioned that. But maybe if we can shift our attention then to the individual, the other stream,
Yeah.
what's the trigger that brings progress there? And how good are we at pulling that trigger as yet?
I think that one varies pretty widely on the industry. So for myself, I've spent a lot of time around community and disability the last decade,
Yeah,
and I think that it's got to be them or that industry amongst leadership in general, I think, are some of the worst in identifying self-care and actually taking the time to look after themselves.
yeah,
Um, but it's I think previously too, it was again one of those buzzwords that, people would throw around. We've got to take self-care. We've got to be mindful. We'll do a 5-minute breathing exercise and some mindfulness and be grounded and be aware of your surroundings. And you could hear the eyes rolling in a
Yeah,
lot of those settings
yeah,
because people would sit
absolutely.
there and go, "Oh, it's this
And I would
again."
even go and say, I think I rolled my eyes as well at
I,
the start of that
I
conversation.
absolutely have. It's just not the right way to go about doing it. I think if you spent 60 seconds saying, "Hey, this is how you can approach self-care and have a think about it, find something that works for you," for most people, it's going to be much more beneficial than a forced meditation.
Yeah,
Um, because for myself, I know that I absolutely hate meditation.
yeah,
I I get fidgety, I can't sit still, and so
yeah,
sitting there having to be grounded and mindful and feel my breathing and feel my feet on the ground and my bum in the chair, I can think of nothing worse. I get twitchy, I get itchy, I just want to get up
yeah,
and walk around.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I think from that more personal side of things, I think there's some work that everybody needs to do and be aware of there that it is really important. And most people won't appreciate that until they've experienced burnout or had somebody that they know that has and seeing how bad that can be and how hard it can be to bring yourself back out of that.
Yeah.
Um, having that self-care and recognizing something that works for you because we're all different. What fills your cup? What gives you that opportunity to switch off and just be you or not think about things, whether it's going for a hike, listening to music, going out with friends, baking, um, finding something that works. And, it was something that I practiced with my teams previously of, look, it doesn't have to be anything grandiose. If you can
Yeah,
find something that works and you're happy to share it to see if it might, spark something for someone else, absolutely fantastic. And we used to share things, across the week and across the mornings that, hey, this is what I've done. This is how I've turned up for myself,
yeah,
even if just to be an inspiration to others of, oh, it's okay to take some time for me. Because I think
mm,
so many of us feel guilty
yeah,
in trying to slow the world down and go, well, I need 10 minutes, I need an hour, because
yeah.
we're all just so time poor in a world that just continues to build speed and momentum.
Hmm. Can I challenge that time poor thing? Well, maybe not challenge,
Oh, absolutely.
perspective. So
Sure.
of late, this subject has come up quite a bit of late, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. So the tall poppy syndrome, a fee
Hmm.
we pay in Australia.
Hmm.
So if Rodney comes along and he goes, you know what, I think I'm going to take some time for myself so I can be better at work,
Yep.
and I put it through that filter of the tall poppy syndrome, that's a hard pass. Like, what are you doing? Just be like everybody else
Yeah.
and do what you got to do. Don't be shining. Don't be trying to shine. Don't find the place to grow. None of that.
Yep.
And the context of the conversations I've been having is that whilst we're trying to fix this other thing, like go and have self care, actually, we probably need to fix this thing that says you're not allowed to shine
Mm.
before I can even think about fixing the other thing.
Yeah. And it is it like most of these topics when you're talking about people, it's such a complex system because
Yeah,
there's never one good place to start. It's a bit of a look, we'll start here, we'll end up sort of coming around the circle and we'll get back to that point and then we'll do another run and refine further. But
yeah,
it's not the sort of thing where there's a start and finish line. It's a constantly moving merry-go-round. You just kind of jump on and start.
yeah,
And in relation to that tall poppy syndrome, because it is quite a challenge, it comes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier in some of that safety as well.
yeah,
It's not just going, well, nah, you can't do that. Like just suck it up, come in. We all sit here 5 days a week or 6 days a
yeah,
week and do this. Why can't you do it? Um, and thankfully, I think it is a shifting mentality across the country and globally as well to some degree. But recognizing that no two people are the same. Like you might be doing the same work, but someone might be at home with 5 children as a single parent, and coming into work is their one sense of peace and downtime.
yeah. That's
But
right. Go to
for
work to
someone
rest.
else, that's right. For others, it's the complete opposite. You go to work, you've got to deal with, 50 people around you when you're a bit more introverted and, socially, you find it very draining to be on all the time for those people where you live alone, you've got some pets, and that's your downtime and your peace. So
Yeah,
I think having that kind of insight and being able to take that perspective to, oh, well, maybe there's more going on for them is really important. But it also goes to show of how is the team showing up, from the ground, from leadership, from every layer of that, and how are they working together to educate and be supportive and make a safe space. Where if
Yeah,
someone comes in and says, I'm not coping, I'm taking 10 minutes for me, I'm doing this, that we don't have that kind of approach and that tall poppy syndrome coming through. It's just, yeah, look, what can we do to help? Is there,
yeah,
can I pick up a phone call for you? I make a coffee and sit down with you, have a 10-minute chat and, something I can help with. And
yeah,
taking that more supportive approach instead of that, "Oh, well, why do they get to do it?" kind
yeah,
of
yeah, that's
sense
right.
that we usually see.
And it's interesting. So, if I can reflect on my counseling sort of gigs, the times I wear my counseling hat, often in when the that discussion comes to play,
Mm,
and this idea of Rodney needs to show Rodney some grace, that is often a very hard idea to process for some people.
hmm
Is that your understanding too? And if so, do you want to take a stab at what's the hurdle? What's the hurdle to show grace to yourself?
Yeah, it's definitely not a simple thing. I would agree with you wholeheartedly there. I think I guess for the self in recognizing that we need to be kinder to ourselves and things like that, that's something that I think is really hard to demonstrate to people unless they've had some sort of experience or you can find some way to get them to relate to the outcome for that. For people that are a little bit more analytical, it might be is here's the figures and the facts of what will happen if you get to this point where doubt you're not operating at 100%. It's not just you, it's your family, it's your work, it's your clients, whatever's going to hit closest to home for them. Um, I think for the people that are maybe a little bit more emotionally aware rather than say data driven, it's about helping them to recognize, well, how is this showing up for you? We've noticed that you've become quite agitated around these things, or you've lost your spark around these activities that you used to, flourish with and really turn up and take the reins on and lead everybody else through that. Now you just feel like a bit of a bystander. And
Yeah,
it's, I think, opening those conversations and knowing from that manager perspective, you really need to know the people that you're working with and what makes them tick, how they operate, where they kind of sit across the scale so that you know how to support them.
yeah,
Um, I think one of the fundamentals as a leader in that is that you're not there. I mean, yes, you've got your own work to do and your own task, but primarily your role is to enable the people reporting to you. And I think to do that effectively, you need to understand those people as
yeah,
individuals, not just as a person in the team, and as part of that team, but who they are, what makes them tick, what they respond to. And then coming back to from that individual aspect of being able to have that conversation, whether it's from a leader to someone that reports to them or sideways to a colleague, having that relationship, that safe space, being able to say, okay, I know that Rodney is much more analytical in what he
yeah,
responds to. Rodney, here's the data. You keep going the way you're going to go. Here's
yeah,
the facts and figures of what that's going to look like as an outcome. And, I know that's going to kill you and,
yeah,
eat you up inside. So how do we stop that happening?
yeah,
And, from I think one of the biggest things that I've really appreciated in that aspect of knowing how to engage people more effectively in that is the disc profiles and knowing where people sit across those four categories, what
yeah.
they respond, how they process. I think for me, that's probably one of the single greatest tools in helping people to understand how to navigate that.
As you were talking there, Dion, I was just reflecting on a previous episode, Jason Blatt, and he made a
hmm
statement, and it was in the context of clinical work and him being the client. But I think of it in the context of commerce, and he's made the statement that they were trying to fix me, and nobody was taking the time to find out why I needed fixing.
Yep.
And I wonder if if we're not paying a similar bill when we think about this commercial conversation that we're having here,
Mm.
or even in the context of the way we look internally at ourselves, or this idea of giving ourselves empathy or grace.
I think it interesting timing wise, and life has a funny little way of doing this to us sometimes. I attended a workshop this morning where that was something that actually came up around talking about emotional agility. And one of the things that came out that really stuck with me from that was you can't, you'll never be able to grow or change without understanding what's currently happening.
Mm.
And I'm paraphrasing that, and it was much more eloquent in in the presentation.
Yeah,
Um, but it comes back to what you were just saying there. If you don't understand, why it's happening to someone, whether that's something that you're trying to implement change or trying to support somebody through, grief, loss, difficulties that they're facing, whatever it might be.
yeah,
If you don't understand what the problem is or why it's happening or what it's doing, you can't truly change that or do anything to grow from that because
yeah,
you're layering things over a rocky foundation, but then you're also potentially not targeting the issue. You're targeting how it's showing up on the surface, not
yeah,
what's sitting underneath it that actually needs solving. So when you do that, it might take 3 days, it might take 3 months, but ultimately that's going to continue to bubble under the surface and it's going to show up. Like I know your background in construction and building there. If you
yeah,
don't set the foundations right and you've got a giant pocket under your slab,
yeah,
eventually that pocket's going to give and it's going to cause all sorts of damage and issues, right?
yeah,
To everything else that you've built on top of it.
yeah,
This is much the same. You need to understand that root cause. And that's what
yeah.
most people miss.
If I gave you the magic wand speech and I said, Dion, here's the magic wand, wave it for us. What is your intrinsic response suggest?
Something that I was shown through my early days of leadership that I really appreciated and has stuck with me in navigating that is asking the five whys.
Yep.
Because I think if you get a response and you can ask that why, it brings out something different. And by the time you do that, generally 5 times, you've hit the root cause
Yeah.
of what that issue is. It's not just, oh, I'm having a bad day. Okay, well, why?
Yeah.
Well, this morning, this, and this happened. Okay, well,
Yeah.
why did those things happen? Well, last night went to crap. This happened. I didn't do my normal routines, and so
Yeah.
on and so forth. You get the picture, and that might have stemmed from the fact that, man, look, forgot to pay my rego yesterday, got a speeding fine, whatever it was, and
Yeah.
that's caused the domino down the line.
Yeah.
And that comes back to, right, well, how do we fix that? Well, we stop you from speeding. Maybe we use the cruise control a little bit more. We set the alarm in the dash so when you go over this a certain speed limit, it beeps at you so you know,
Yeah.
as opposed to what it turned up as, oh, well, my morning was really difficult. I was late, stepped in the dog's water bowl on the way out the door, so now my shoe's wet and I'm coming into the office and okay, well, how do we fix the dry shoe? Great, go put it under the hand dryer for 5 minutes. Problem solved.
Yeah.
But actually, it's a speeding ticket that happened yesterday.
That's the problem.
Um,
That's right.
so th for me, I think that five whys and getting to the root is probably one of the simplest ways that you can do it that I've found to be effective across a number of situations that I've had over time.
That's cool. And I'm going to put my coaching hat on now. So, why you late, Rodney, or why you late, Dion? It feels like we're going to argue. If I said to you, what's the reason we're late, Dion? How does that feel? It
Yeah.
feels like we're like working it out. We're in a team. So I like the why thing. I always say, can we change the five whys to five whats?
Yeah.
What's the reason that happened? What's the reason that? And it's that safety thing again. So he's not
Hmm.
pointing a finger at me. He's trying to stand next to me and go, let's see if we can figure this thing out.
Yeah.
What's and it's so interesting because obviously we use that in counseling and coaching all the time, and it takes a bit of training just to sort of switch your mind from why to what. But
Mm.
it's a language thing. It's not nothing more than a language thing.
Yeah.
But the results can be quite rich. So anyway, just a thing that
And
floats my
and
boat.
you're 100% right there. Like I mean, the five whys, I guess, is that fundamental premise of it, right? But
Yeah,
the framing is, probably more important than the actual fundamental of, okay, well, ask why. Well, it's not that simple. It's the premise, but how
yeah,
you get to that can look vastly different across the
yeah.
people you're working with, the situation, how safe they
Right.
feel, the relationship. So
Yeah,
I agree with you there. I think what is a very nice way of putting it compared to why. It's a much
yeah,
easier and safer way to broach that conversation. Um, but yeah, I think for leaders out there going through that might be taking that on board or trying it for the first time, think about your framing in what you're doing it, or so who you're doing it with and how you're doing it.
Yeah.
But you want to get to that root cause. It doesn't necessarily have to be why specifically.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like even if you turn the voice internally, like, why'd you get that fine yesterday, Rodney? What was the reason I got that fine yesterday was, oh, I was late for work. It naturally opens your mind to the inquiry rather than why is, oh, flip, I failed. Like the measuring sticks come out and,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's out to get me. What is the package or product that you present? So if I'm in the marketplace and I run into Dion in the world, what is Dion doing that I'm investing in or purchasing off?
It's called DMT Coaching and Support Services, and a lot of the work that I do is around what we've been talking about. So helping teams and services identify how do you make that space safe for staff, particularly for newer leaders coming through where they've been experts in their field, whether it's client facing or whatever.
Yeah,
They've moved into leadership positions, and all of a sudden it's a whole new world. It's a whole new skill set to learn and how to juggle people in that
yeah,
sense. Um, so working with them, what are their strengths? Where do they feel their gaps are? How do we keep them, feeling safe and secure in that and getting their practices up to speed so that they're confident in showing up and letting their teams learn from example and
yeah,
not just from words in a policy.
yeah,
Um, yeah, helping them work through identifying bottlenecks in workflow, work system efficiencies,
yeah,
and also doing some work around some financial security as well. And when I say financial security, so helping to identify cash flow, where things could be going wrong, how to secure that work, particularly around disability and community sector. So lots of very close to home conversations with and vulnerable conversations as well with organizations and leaders around what do you think the challenges are that your team are facing? Right. Now let's go ask the team what
yeah,
challenges are showing up for them. How do we meet in the middle so that everyone's aligned and everyone's working towards the same shared goal with
yeah,
that shared accountability, not just he said, she said, or that's a him problem or that's a her
yeah,
problem,
that's right.
working from a combined front.
Just as a matter of interest, so what is NDIS? The changes in NDIS, what does that mean on the ground level? So when you're talking about these kind of industries and helping
Mhm.
this kind of industry, are we at the beginning stages of a tsunami?
I think in the NDIS space, anybody that has worked in it for a while, I think we always feel like any day is one day away from the beginning of a tsunami. You never know. It could happen at the drop of a hat. Um, but I think it's natural progression in a lot of ways. Like we saw, Medicare when it first started out, it took the better part of 30 years to come to what it is now and begin to stabilize and come to something that was functioning in a way that was intended and supporting people. And it still has its gaps. And,
Yeah,
many people complain about it to this day, but it's still one of the better functioning healthcare systems across the world.
yeah,
Um, I feel that NDIS is very similar in that, it's something that has not been done to this scale and this format across the world. Uh, I don't think anybody was expecting it to be well functioning and stable for the first couple of decades.
yeah,
And, from full launch, we're what, 8 years in from where it really started to go national and launch properly. So
yeah,
we're still very early days. And with the changes that are coming through at the moment and, the proposed reforms that we've seen over the last few months and the legislative changes and things, it's work that's been sitting in the background and having a light shone on it since 2023 when Bill Shorten finished his review of the NDIS and had a look over everything.
yeah,
Most of the things we're seeing now were put forward then. And this is just the first instance of what it is in reality. Um, I feel that there is going to be a bit of an overcorrection to try and balance that out and get it back on track where they feel that it's not doing what it was equipped to do. And unfortunately, that does mean that people are going to be impacted by that because it's a scheme about supporting people with disability. Some people that
yeah,
are very vulnerable and don't have the capacity or the supports around them to navigate that
yeah,
effectively. And it's one of the remarkable things that I'm seeing across the industry of how many providers and services and professionals are banding together to collaborate and try and work with each other and the community for a better outcome and to support that storm that's coming and that little bit of a tsunami that feels like it's forming, not out of financial gain or long-term benefit or anything like that, but just to genuinely turn up and
Yeah.
support. So there's a lot of unknowns that have been put forward. There's a lot of proposed knowns that have come out of that as well. But I think we've seen enough of those over the past 5, 6 years as well, where we've gotten a week out from D-Day or 24 hours out and the whole thing's been scrapped and the rug's been pulled out. So I
Yeah.
think until some of those changes actually come to light and they're firmly set in and they've taken off, it's about being flexible. It's about
Yeah.
thinking critically, assessing what's going on, really understanding where you fit in the lovely puzzle that is the NDIS at the moment, and then understanding what does it mean for you? What do I need to be ready for, and how can I equip myself so that if and when a change comes, all my eggs aren't floating down the river in the basket that I left behind.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's the biggest piece for people at the moment. It's just being ready and being fluid rather
Yeah.
than rigid and feeling like you're set in stone or locked into anything in particular.
And does that circle then all the way back to this idea of yes, change? Am I safe in change or am I not? Are we back at that doorstep?
I mean, it bleeds through. I think the difference is when we're talking about, call it smaller scale change in terms of a team and organization where you've got specific people that you can help understand that you can bring on board to have a part to play in that and feel included and actually consult and put their opinions forward and be part of that change to give them that sense of safety and belonging within that so that they understand and they appreciate what's changing and why. I think in the space of something as grand as the NDIS is that the people that are presenting that change to the wider public are often not the same people that are involved in those conversations. They get the snippet, they get the brief and the script of, hey, you're going to present this,
Yeah.
right? They're not the same people that are necessarily involved in all those conversations behind doors to know all the context and things like that. And unfortunately, in the day and age that we live in, where everything is so technologically equipped and it moves so fast across social media, AI, the media in general, um, and we're all so maybe not all of us, so many people are so quick to get that dopamine fix. They don't want to read an article that's even 2, 3 paragraphs long. They want
Mm.
to read 3 lines. And I think they'll grab a catchy title, they'll read one paragraph and go, right, I know exactly what's happening here. I'm going to go spread the word.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're 15 steps off of what the original messaging was, or there was some ambiguity to it and gaps that weren't filled that people make up based on their own perspective and experience. And that continues.
Yeah.
And the message gets lost very, very quickly because all of us have taken one little snippet that's grabbed our attention amongst the whole message, and it spreads like wildfire.
Yeah.
And it creates so much panic and stress in a space like the NDIS where we are talking about very high risk and vulnerable people in some cases, particularly in that psychosocial disability
Mm.
space. It's really important for, I think, anybody presenting those messages, but even for the individuals reading it, to do your due diligence in researching what's actually out there, what has been said, unpacking and understanding what that means, not just taking it all at face value,
Yeah.
because there's far too much misinformation out there, and people doing it for you um, sort of social media presence, getting it out there, getting more views, getting more likes by having a catchy title that appeals to the masses instead of something that appeals to the truth. Um, and that's a very dangerous place to be in, I think, for a lot of people.
I like that idea. Now, Dion, if somebody wants to know more, use your services, find your support, how do they do that? Where do they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn. So Dion Tobi. You can find me through my website, which is dmtcss.com.au. And then we've also got the Facebook page as well. All of my contact details are spread across all three of those. you can Google me or my company, and generally in the first couple of things that pop up, thankfully, haven't lost that battle to the algorithm yet. Um, but yeah, always happy to have a chat.
Well, I thank you for your time, and it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you again for having me, Rodney. Pleasure's been all mine.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Your Truth Explored. If today's episode resonated with you, please take a moment to follow the podcast and share it with someone who might benefit from the conversation. Your support helps these messages reach the people who need them most. If you'd like to explore your own truths more deeply, you're welcome to connect with me at yourtruthservices.com.au about coaching or counseling bookings. Also available on that website is our other resources such as music, books, and videos. Until next time, take care and stay connected to your truth.